All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Gina Wallner. I am the Dean at Bay College West Campus. Welcome to another virtual career panel. These panels focus on a variety of fields and are designed to provide students the opportunity to gain insight into areas of interest and get advice from professionals currently working in the field. Today's field of interest is marketing, and our three panelists include Mark Klossner, VP of Marketing at Boss Snowplow, located in Iron Mountain, Michigan; Dave Olson, VP of Strategic Services for the Marketing Department, located in Houghton, Michigan; and John Spigarelli, Managing Director at Elegant Seagulls, located in Marquette, Michigan. Is that right, guys? I probably should have double checked that to make sure before we get started. Okay, to kick things off, I don't have a name assigned for the tell me your story, but whoever wants to take the bait first, we'll just kind of go around the room and get some insight into who each of you are.
I'll take the bait first on that.
All right.
Sounds good. So I'm John Spigarelli. I'm originally from Iron Mountain, which I got super excited about. I'm a mountaineer, not a flivver, FYI.
Hey, it's all right.
Okay, it's all one family now. It's all one family. That's how we do it there now. But I was, I went to Northern. I graduated in '95. I went to Northern. I thought I was going to be a high school history teacher, and I realized I couldn't pass a math class. So I took 090 math twice, and the professor came up to me. He's like, "Ugh, you probably should think about doing something different." So I walked into the degree audits one day, and I was like, I knew I needed to change my major. My mom and dad were like, "You're either finding a major, or you're coming home. I'm going to the Army," and I wasn't cutting it in the Army. Like, I just knew that was not happening. So I ended up with majoring in PR, minoring in marketing. I had a 5.5-year stint for a 4-year degree at NMU. But while I was going to school, I actually started working at Getz's on the sales floor. So Getz's clothing store in Marquette, working through that, and ended up staying around there for quite a few years and really honed the marketing craft, especially online marketing, through their e-com arm. So I was responsible for the majority of that growth through 2013, and I left. I was actually a client of Elegant Seagulls, and I moved over to Elegant Seagulls at that point, and have been here ever since. So that's my story and how I ended up here. Lived 2 places in my life, Iron Mountain and Marquette.
Do you have an interesting fact about yourself that someone might not know?
I think a lot of people know this, but I'm kind of a nerd and a workaholic. Like, I do a tremendous amount of reading around all things marketing related and all things e-com related. So it was an interest that turned into a hobby that kind of turned into an obsession. And now I'm at that point in my career, I'm actually struggling to keep up with everything because there's so much changing because of the day-to-day. So that's where I stand.
Awesome. Not an obsession, a passion.
Obsession. It's good. It's okay. It's okay to be obsessed with a few things.
It is. Yeah, I get it. Who's next?
That's good to hear. I'll be the second to bite the bait. My name is Dave Olson. I am living in Houghton, Michigan right now. My family lived in Lower Michigan, Colorado, and Houghton. Kind of traveled all around the country and been in a lot of places. My family is a group of teachers and musicians. That's kind of the background that I have. And I thought that I was going to become a professional trumpet player when I was in high school. And as I got closer to that point, I learned that I didn't love it that much. I was a good trumpet player. I enjoyed being in music groups, but it was like more work for me and fear and stuff that I just wasn't really into. And I'm glad that I learned that early before I made a poor decision on what to do. So I opened up my eyes and I realized I grew up I was a kid in the 1960s. So it gives you an idea, dates me a little bit, but I grew up in the golden age of advertising. And I took a class at Michigan State, and I wasn't really sure what I was going to do. And I took an advertising class, and I said, you know what? I know all this stuff. It was like I was like, this is coming pretty naturally to me. So I became very excited about it. So I went there, and I continued on at Michigan State. I got a degree from there in communication with a focus in advertising. And I also consider my first jobs coming out of school. I worked in local radio and local newspaper as part of my education. I was able to put it to work and put my creative strength to work right away. After that, I spent 20 years in Chicago where I worked my way up in one marketing agency. And I started as kind of an entry-level position. And when I left 20 years later, I was the president and chief marketing officer of the agency. And when I started, it had 35 people. When I left, it had 90. And we had clients all over the world, and I traveled all over the world. It was a great ride, and I love marketing. I love what it's been able to do for my life, and really, it keeps my perspective really strong. I am an owner and a partner in the marketing department now. I like to position myself as a business energizer and marketing engineer. So, John, you said you're a nerd. I guess I'm a little bit of a nerd, but I like to apply engineer to marketing because it really hasn't been done before, and I thought it was kind of creative. But I love this field. I get to fire start. I get to be a promoter of everything that I work on, and I really enjoy it. I did write down here a fact about you that most people would find interesting and probably don't know. I use this a lot when I get asked this question. My mother was born in Transylvania. To the best of my knowledge, I'm not a vampire. So
that's where my mind went, Dave. So
that's why I share it, because yeah, she literally was born in Transylvania, and that's just a neat thing to be able to say.
Cool.
So,
very cool.
Yeah.
I always think marketing people are always some of the most fun people. So nerd or not, we're just a fun group, I think. So
yeah.
Mark, your turn. You're up to bat.
Right. Yeah. Well, and you know what? I like that everyone's self-identifying themselves as a nerd or a geek in some way, shape, or form. That, the job that I have right now, which is Vice President of Marketing at Boss Snowplow down in Iron Mountain, Michigan, aligns closely with one of my lifelong geek passions, and that is weather. If there was anything that I could have chosen to do for a career path besides marketing, it would have been meteorology. Unfortunately, meteorologists require let's just say a sled load of mathematics classes. It is literally like having a physics degree. So early on in my college career, after I think the first calculus class, I asked myself some pretty tough questions and said, probably not the path in the long run for me. So I'm from southern Wisconsin originally, just a little bit north of Madison. Moved up here in 2009 to take the marketing function over at Boss Snowplow, where I'm in charge of marketing communications and new product development from the marketing side of things, like voice of the customer collection and things like that. Prior to that, I was with Mercury Marine down in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, for about 10 years in a couple of different marketing roles. One, which was a marketing segment manager for freshwater fishing and freshwater angling. So if you were a person that watched fishing shows or still do, back in those days, I probably managed that person's contract and probably had some sort of a professional relationship with that television fishing person, if you will. Then I moved over to a product management role at Mercury Marine. Back then it was called a platform manager. So I handled all aspects of marketing for engine platforms. And in the case for me, it was bass boat engines and things like that. So it was everything from new product projects, coming up with the product specifications for the engineering department to work on next for engine platforms, to go to market strategies with new engine platforms, working with the advertising agency and all of the marcom materials related to those platforms, all of those things. So it was really, honestly, because I love to fish as a hobby, I could honestly say that was probably the combination of those jobs at Mercury were my dream jobs. I mean, they were literally, if I had to pick a perfect job for me, those were it. Why I left, you're probably asking? Volatility in the market, right? So as the economy came and went and slowed and grew, especially in 07, 08, those type of goods, those luxury goods, were not doing so well in 2007 and 2008. And at that point in my life, I was trying to raise a family, and I got a little bit tired of the volatility and a couple layoffs and things like that going on. So I decided to move on, and that's how I came to Boss Snowplow, which I do not regret at all. I think it's a really cool, a great brand. And when I looked at it back then from a marketing guy standpoint, marketing guy to the brand was still here. So the brand started in '85, and he was still here, and he was trying to retire. So they were looking for somebody that would fit culturally, which I think is huge in any marketing job. And I came up and have no regrets. And then I had John Deere prior to Mercury Marine for a couple of years as a product specialist too, just a kind of a different marketing type role. I manage a staff of about 5 people at Boss, and I'm looking to grow that over the next couple of years as we get even deeper into e-com and some of the other things that we're looking at, smart connected products and all of those kind of really cool things from a snow and ice removal industry standpoint. I graduated from UW Oshkosh in 1994. My God, I almost forgot my own graduation date. In journalism with an emphasis in PR and advertising. And while I was there, I was editor-in-chief of the college newspaper for a semester, which was one of the hardest jobs I've ever had in my life. It was managing 30 college students, trying to put out a weekly newspaper and getting paid, I think it was $50 a week to do so. So it was absolutely brutal, but I wouldn't have changed it for the world. And a fun fact for me, I guess, I don't know if this is fun, but my first job out of college was a newspaper reporter. I was a newspaper reporter. So I covered the Packers, John, and I covered, courts. And
Don't even bring up the Packers right now. It's fine.
Well, John and I were talking the other day because there was a game the other day that may or may not have taken place in Green Bay, and we're just going to choose to move on from that now and act as though it never really actually happened. So, but the bottom line is all of that work as a newspaper reporter, I feel, and this will transition to the rest of our discussion, that being a naturally curious person is absolutely critical to being a good marketing person. Mm-hmm. And newspaper reporters, if you're a good one, you have a lot of natural curiosity. You want to keep asking questions, and you're able to read between the lines and understand what people really mean, even though if they're saying one thing, they may mean another. And I think that that's why it seems a little unusual that talent set, aligns very well with marketing.
For sure.
And that's me.
Awesome. All right, you guys, we'll start rolling through the questions. So John's up first. What does your job look like day to day? And what tasks do you spend the majority of your time
on? I have a weird job, especially with a little bit of an enhancement of this new role as the managing director. So I actually am probably a step or two away from actual tactical deployment of marketing. Like we don't tactically deploy marketing that we create. Like we as an agency, because we're a design and development agency, is we're executing on go-to-market strategies and preset approach from large clients. So I spend probably half my time in just relationship management. I spend a quarter of my time. Relationship management is really understanding and getting close to clients and understanding them like I work there.
Sure.
The second piece is interpreting their go-to-market strategy, their approach to how they want to present their brand, the channels they're using. And then after that's all said and done, I work with my team directly to help create the collateral that lives in those spaces to help promote the marketing side of things. That's the majority of what I do. I spend a lot of time emailing people. I spend a lot of time on Zoom calls. I spend a lot of time taking notes and rehashing notes and trying to make sure that I'm as close to knowledgeable as possible from every angle for clients. I think that's where we bring a lot of value or build a lot of value, is trying to just be more than living in this space that they specifically asked us to live in. Like I have some clients where I'm like, hey, we do this, but have you thought about this or this? My feedback doesn't matter, but as a value add, I have some expertise. It might be minimal, but have you considered this? And 7 times out of 10, people are like, we got that. And every once in a while, people are like, that's actually really interesting. Let's have a further discussion. Sure. So that's really my day-to-day from an agency standpoint.
Cool. Mark, Dave, how does that, similar or different?
For me, there are some big similarities. For the marketing department, we are really pretty integrated across the marketing spectrum. So we do a lot of things. I mean, we're developing brands, we're doing promotions, we're doing consumer research, we're doing trade research, we're evaluating analytics, we're doing digital programs, we're doing social media, we're building websites. We do a lot of touch points for the brand. So part of my role, I do a lot of creative direction, but I think the biggest part of what I do is organizing the work. I spend a lot of time. Yeah, well, it's operations, but I also have to creatively lead. I need to. My role is to be like the chief inspiration officer. You know, I want to make sure that people are really following through on a path to try to make really cool stuff and to make things stand out. But part of that then is organizing our day, and I would say that I spend about a day out of every week just dedicated to what the team is doing. And then kind of tracking back to make sure that we're working to goals and objectives that have been set out for either a specific project, or to always factor in, well, what are the goals and the objectives of our client overall? Because it's easy to get sidetracked when you work on so many things with, let's say, a passion, you know, like you want to explore a cool idea, but it might not be really right on track for what the client needs. So I like to try to make sure that we're not off wandering too far, that we stay focused on what the client's needs are. And unfortunately, I have to spend a lot of time keeping everything on track. So
sure. You're doing more on the creative side, it sounds like, on that idea generation. How big is your team, Dave?
We have 11 people and actually growing. We just hired a new creative project manager, and his first week was last week, and that's going to actually help me out a lot in this actual organization task that I do, because I also do a lot of client relations work. I share the ownership of the agency with Karen, and we run the agency. But you know, we both do a lot of things, and so it really comes down to somebody needs to manage the work, somebody needs to manage the clients, and while we share in that, I tend to work on the manage the work side.
Mark, you're kind of you're not in the agency setting, you're more in the manufacturing. I'm sure yours is a little different.
Yeah, it is. So I guess the best place to start is every year we sit down, we write a strategic plan, right? Like, what are the things as a brand and a company that we want to accomplish? And many of those things are connected to marketing, right? So on a daily basis, we reference that plan and we're working towards completing the things that we've outlined for this fiscal year. And so my team, you know, is divided up based on, you know, their responsibilities, which is, like social media analysis, parts forecasting, things like that, right? So on a daily basis, that's what I'm working on. Each of them is doing their individual jobs, and you know, I am trying to help them. Like, are you having issues? Are you have questions? Is there something you want to propose, et cetera, et cetera? So there's that, and then there's, you know, if conflict comes up in any way, shape, or form, and some of the, turns out that sometimes marketing and engineering don't always get along. Sometimes they don't communicate with each other in the best way. So I have to make sure that those bridges are in place, right? Like, we communicate clearly, because we're selling into a distribution channel, right? And we have to make sure what we're selling is set up properly in different processes and systems, that it's priced, and that we're communicating to the channel, here's what's coming, here's what's changing, here's why ours is better, all of those things. In addition, I spend quite a bit of time managing our advertising agency, which is Jacobson Ross from the Milwaukee and Chicago market area. So they're handling all of our creative, and as such, I'm weighing in on the creative, and we're just talking about what we want to talk about for the year. And it changes from year to year. There's the general branding stuff, and then there's the specific to a product stuff, all of those things. So. And then as far as, you know, managing what we're working on next from a product standpoint, there are other agencies that we work with that handle our market research. So kind of weighing in on what they've found for results, what we want to learn next, how we want to learn it, and then compiling those into a document that we can share with engineering and say, according to the information that we have from the field, this is what we should be working on next for products in the short term, long term, and midterm. So that's what I spend my day-to-day life doing.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you, guys. Mark, you're next on the list. What skills were you lacking when you first started? And then in addition to that, as you're, it sounds like all of you are growing, which is wonderful. What skills are you seeing lacking when you're trying to hire new people, or especially, people that are just graduating from college?
I think that this is a great question, right? And I think especially when you first start out in marketing, you're probably in some sort of low-level job, right? Like you're kind of at the bottom of the ladder and you're going to work your way up, and you have a lot to learn. Like you think when you come out of college, you know everything, but as most people learn, they don't know everything. So I think when I got that first really prominent role at Mercury Marine, which was the freshwater segment manager, I had a massive budget to manage. I had professional television pro contracts to manage, and then I had an advertising agency that I had to manage. So those were three big responsibilities that I didn't know, and I didn't really have the skill set, right? So I think that if I had to summarize it, one of the skills that I lacked the most was just a general knowledge of business acumen, right? So if you're in college and you're thinking about doing marketing as a career, I cannot emphasize enough the importance of maybe taking some accounting classes and just understanding P&L and balance sheets and all those things, because if you aspire to work really in a high level in any marketing group or organization, you're going to have to understand those concepts, because it turns out money makes the world go round, right? And then the other thing that I lacked early on in my career was emotional maturity. And we talk about a lot in the Leadership Academy too, Gina, but when I was younger and, you get into some of these roles and it turns out that disagreement is part of working in a professional environment, and somebody says, I don't like your idea, or I think you're going about this the wrong way, or sometimes you mess up, especially when you're younger, you make mistakes, right? And I think that early on I could have handled those things better, right? And what I learned and was taught from some great leaders throughout those years is stay calm, and as they say, work the problem and not the people. And the other thing is I'm hardwired in such a way that this emotional maturity is something I really have to work and focus on. I'm a very competitive person, right? And especially with competitors, like in other brands that I'm competing against out in the marketplace, I don't like to lose. So sometimes, especially when I was younger, that would manifest itself in some not such great ways. And that is definitely something, as you get into, especially in a creative environment, which marketing is, criticism is part of the game, and you're going to have to be able to take it. And I saw many, many creative people early in my career that worked at the agencies we were working with absolutely come unglued during big meetings. Like I sat and kind of was taken back, like, wow, you are completely out of line. So if you're going to do this for a living, you have to stay calm, because you're going to get criticized. It's going to happen. Lacking skills that I see coming out, especially with people coming right out of school, poor writing skills. It's getting really hard to find people that can write. And, I think the second one, probably somewhat related to that, is just poor interpersonal communication skills.
Sure. This stuff, right? Everyone's looking at their phones.
Yeah, they're always looking at their phones. And, I even have a note, these are probably all symptoms of the connected age that we're in, but they have trouble making eye contact. Talking. They don't want to talk on the phone. They don't want to call people when there's an issue. They want to text. And, if you're going to work in this industry, in this field, you have got to be able to talk to people, because this is where you get all of your information from, right? And face-to-face is often the best in many cases, because you get to read the person. You get to see all those cues. How are they feeling about something, right?
Sure.
There's what they say and what they mean, and those are different things. So those are the two things that if you're thinking about work in marketing, you have to talk to people and you have to be able to write. So you concentrate on those things, hone your skills, and it'll get you much further.
Good stuff. John, Dave, do you want to add to that at all?
Just to double down on what Mark said, because I agree with everything you've said, Mark, there. The other pieces, I find a struggle with people that just don't listen. like the two-way piece of communication. Like I find people that can't communicate externally in a way that makes sense, compounded with the fact that they are disinterested in picking out the subtle cues in a conversation that will make all the difference in the world 1 week, 2 weeks, 5 weeks down the road, because that's how, when it comes to the disagreements you may have in discussing creative pieces, those are the pieces that come into play to help prove your point in a way that's highly respectful, but also is really powerful. I think that's just a skill set that I think is hard. That's a hard thing to learn. It's something that's tough to teach yourself, but I think everybody can do a better job of just having the moment to saying, okay, am I listening here, or am I too busy formulating my next rebuttal or my next argument?
Listening to learn or listening to respond, right?
Mm-hmm.
Dave, anything to add?
I also agree very much with everything that's being said. When I was in college, I was a student who took my degree very seriously. I was paying for most of college by myself, and I wanted to get value out of it. I had some roommates who, they wouldn't study. They were like in it just to get through this program. And I did it the other way. I overworked it, and I really took it seriously. But even when I got out and I started to work, the one thing I was lacking, and I think, Mark, you said business acumen, I kind of equated it to confidence. I thought that I knew what I was doing, but I didn't feel 100% confident. And confidence is the only way you gain confidence is by knowing the things that you're doing actually worked. And that you are endorsed by people who are mentoring you or leading you. They say, yes, that's the right thing to do. You're doing it well. So I think that the advice that I would give to everybody out there is when you are in a situation where you don't feel 100% confident, make sure to keep your ears open, because advice can come, and sometimes it might be from the person who might be your boss, but sometimes it might be from somebody who you're working with. And you can learn a lot just by keeping your ears open. The lacking skill, the things that people are lacking now in new hires. One of the things that I really that I get kind of aggravated by is when people don't remember what we did last week. We're working on a project. We just spent all this time. We ran into some hiccups. We made it work. We brought it together. We fixed the situation. We made it work excellently. Then we start a new project, and it's like we're starting from scratch sometimes, especially with new hires. They're not taking what was learned in the past and then applying it to right now. So I think that what people should do, especially when they're young in their careers, is they need to remember to document in their mind. I'm not sure you don't have to write everything down, but you got to remember, what did you just go through that you can apply to this next situation? How can you learn from what you just did into what you're doing today? And then take what you're doing today and see if you can put it into tomorrow. So that helped me a lot as I learned from my experiences and learned from other people. And I used that, as I grew, and I was always able to reflect backwards in order to go forwards.
Totally. I remember thinking I could take feedback really well. Like I'd be like, yeah, I take feedback really well. And then I had my first job where I really got some feedback, and I was like, like crying in the bathroom. But now I really think I can, but it takes practice, and it's a hard pill to swallow.
Gina, one thing I wanted to add to this, because I think it's super important, and this is kind of a buzzy term that probably started last year, but I'm for people that are studying marketing, large organizations are looking for full stack marketers. And what that means in my eyes is they want a marketer that understands business analytics, how to copyright, how to potentially use some light design programs, how to modify visuals, how to explore deeper into messaging, like the more well-rounded portion of a marketer. That role in organizations, large organizations, people are hungry to fill those spots, and there aren't very many people out there right now that have that rounded skill set.
That's actually a perfect segue into Dave's question, which is it better to study marketing on a macro or micro scale? Meaning, is it beneficial to focus on a niche subset of marketing, like a social media piece or direct marketing or database marketing or analytics or something like that? Or is it better, like, lots of tools in the toolbox kind of thing?
Yeah, and I also think this is a great question because it's very thought provoking, and I can't give you a best answer to this, and the reason is because we're all different. People are different. Our minds work in different ways. Some people have a real skill to be able to see the forest through the trees. They can see everything and understand it more globally and holistically, and others can really excel when they really become experts at one or two things. Now, that said, I think that becoming an expert at one or two things is something that you should choose later in your career, after you've really had a chance to get your feet wet and have full exposure to marketing. I think, John, what you said about having I'm going to call it the full plate of marketing capabilities is a really, really important thing. So the first thing I'd like to offer up is that the study of marketing is a huge, big world of thinking. There's so many things. It is certainly a huge career opportunity for anybody because it is so diverse. But understanding everything that's connected to marketing in a macro sense, especially when you're younger, can be a little overwhelming. It really, knowing just enough to be able to talk about it is a good thing, but being able to talk about it and enact a solution with some proven expertise in that area is a little harder. That said, I think it's really important to understand the basics of how marketing disciplines work together as a whole. To understand about how the thing that you're working on here connects to the many other components of the marketing engine. So that you're not doing things in an isolated way. Even if you want to specialize in a niche area of marketing, you need to understand the bigger picture. So my recommendation to students is to take time in college to try to learn as much of the basics of marketing globally as possible. You need to see the big picture, then dive deeper once you have a feel for everything that's going on. If you don't understand marketing basics, you're not going to be able to determine if doing a sales promotion or brand image campaign is the right thing to do. What's right to do when? If you don't understand the reasons why you're working on a new product or service or why consumers would even want the thing you're selling, you might not be a rock star with the micro application that you're actually assigned to work on. So, for example, in our agency, I try to make sure that our social media specialists understands the marketing angle of what we're trying to communicate before we even get to work. I try to make sure people understand, I think I mentioned this earlier, what are our goals? What are our objectives? What are we trying to do? Let's revisit our creative platform. Let's talk about our keywords. Let's talk about how we're dripping this into everything that we're doing. And make sure that when you're working on this assignment, you put that stuff in here. Okay. When that happens, the social media campaign tends to work better with the other things that we're doing for the brand at the same time. Now, the pieces and parts of our marketing campaign are actually reinforcing each other and becoming more effective to grow our client's business. So they're not disconnected. And now that was just like one example. But I think that the idea of understanding the big picture at like a basic level is super valuable to doing great marketing work. The same kind of approach applies if you're doing a research product, data analytics, writing, design, if you're shooting footage. I've had a lot of experience in getting out and shooting footage. What is it? Do you just leave that up to the videographer to shoot? Sometimes, yes, but I like to talk to the videographer or photographer prior about what we're trying to achieve, what our key selling features are, why this is so important to not show it this way and to show it this way. All right. So even with those tasks, it's important to think about the overall big picture of marketing as it relates to the product or the service of the organization that you're trying to promote. So should you know a little about a lot of things or a lot about a few things? I'm sorry, but I think that you need to do a little bit of both. That's kind of my answer on this one.
I think that's good, and some really good examples. You guys, we have about 10 minutes left for staying with the 45 minutes. So I think what I would like to do to keep us on track is we'll just go person by person and let you answer. And then at the end, we'll kind of do like what's, a recap. If there's something that was burning, just make a note so you can bring it up in your recap at the end. Does that work? Just to keep us rolling. All right. So John, I'm going back to you. What was the transition like from studying marketing academically to moving into your career? Was it harder than you thought it would be?
It was super hard because it was at that moment, you think this was 2000, 2001, and it was when the medium shifted so much. So I had a traditional marketing background that understood print marketing and advertising, sales promotion, those type of things. And all of a sudden I got thrown into, okay, there's this thing called goto.com, which all of a sudden turned into AdWords, which all of a sudden turned into Bing ads. And I really had to retrain myself on the tactics and the actual platforms. So the basis I got from my education was super strong, but I literally had to reteach myself everything, like how to use email marketing. All those pieces had to be retaught. And honestly, it was just a kind of a mixed bag of personal interest, a handful of friends that I was picking their brain every night, that type of thing. And it just was a rehash, really what it came down to for me.
Cool. Thanks. That was awesome. I know now I want to add to it, but I'm not going to. We're rolling. I have to follow my own rules. All right. Mark, was there ever a role that you applied for and landed, but you were not 100% qualified to do? How did you proceed?
Yeah, and I think that was that first role I referenced before, the freshwater segment manager at Mercury. I mean, based on where I was prior to that, this was a pretty big jump up, right? And it had, a number of kind of different buckets that were involved with it that were all big and complicated. First, a really large budget. Second, managing an ad or a creative agency as it related to my job and my segment. And then managing television contracts with professional fishermen. So it was pretty overwhelming at first. And we had a little bit of turmoil going on at Mercury as far as leadership was concerned. So there was a little period of time in the beginning of that job that I didn't have the greatest guidance. So I was just kind of feeling it out for myself. And at the end of the day, it was really just about kind of reaching out to my coworkers. So there were other people there, more experienced people that had similar roles prior to myself having it. So I leaned on them and they taught me a lot of things, right? Especially the television contracts, because these were relationships, right? Like some of these people, Mercury had been sponsoring for 20, 30 years on television. And, I think it's the same with even professional athletes. So after a while, those people start to feel like they're larger than the brand. So there were complications in those relationships where you, from a marketing person standpoint, had to talk to them about what their true value to the brand was, and was it diminishing over time? Like these were gut-wrenching conversations with people that I had been watching since I was 5 years old on television, right? So almost like your heroes. And that I'll tell you what, I learned a lot. So I cannot stress and emphasize enough to anybody getting into marketing, building relationships with peers, building relationships with good leaders in the building. Sometimes they're not even your direct manager, but just keep building those connections and relationships. You'll be amazed if they're good people. You'll be amazed that they almost always want to take the information they have and give it to you for free.
Awesome. Yeah. No, I make a note, John and Dave. I feel like I said that and everyone's like quick firing, so it's good. But I am interested to know if anyone else really had a doozy where they like got in a job where it was kind of like, okay, Dave. When you're doing creative work like design, writing, pitching an idea, you're putting yourself out there. What advice do you have to students and folks just starting a career when they receive criticism on their work or ideas? And we talked a little bit about this, but feel free to expand on it. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to this answer. This is a big one.
Yeah.
Well, you're going to hear some of the same things that I've said already. Criticism happens. That is part of the fabric of especially doing creative work in this field. So my best advice for anyone doing creative work is to train yourself to get out in front of the criticisms that actually really hurt or that make you feel inadequate, okay? The last thing you want is criticism like, this doesn't make any sense, or why the heck are we doing this? I don't understand what we're even talking about here today. That leaves you feeling like you've just spent a bunch of time and you're off in never land, and it is not on track. So what I'm going to tell you helps me. I've used this since the beginning of my career, and this will help you avoid those types of criticisms right out of the gate. First, make sure that you work with your client or your boss to establish goals and objectives ahead of doing the work. What are we trying to accomplish? All right. This discussion, that helps you be grounded in your creative development. Second, as you're actually now doing the creative work, keep going back to those goals and objectives and ask yourself, is this work, is what I just hit on here right now, is that delivering? Does it feel good, like it's actually delivering on those goals and objectives? So then you're feeling a little bit more confident and you think that you've got it. Now you're going to go present it to your client or your boss. When you do, start with the goals and objectives. Say, this is what we set out to do in this project. This is why we're doing it. These are the things you asked me to look at. Now, here's why I think that what I'm going to show you delivers on those things. All right. So even if you do all those things, though, and that's a really great way to be out in front of it, because it helps whoever you're presenting to feel that what you're doing is actually you're thinking it through. All right. But you're still going to get criticism. So here's my last piece of advice on this. When someone says, even after you've done all those great things with your goals and objectives, and they still say, I don't necessarily know if I like this, the best question you could possibly ask, and it is fair, is to say, well, tell me why. Why? Why don't you like this? Ask them to talk about why they don't like your idea. And sometimes the answer to why leads you to higher levels than what you would have ever got onto on your own. So why is a great question. Now, I will also tell you, if you run into people, a boss or a client that doesn't want to talk about why, they just say, you know what, I don't need to talk about this, I just don't like it. Then you might want to double think whether you should be working with them. All right, because you're going to be rate limited.
Good. This is like such gold.
Yep.
You're going to be rate limited all the time. If you want to do great work, you need to have clients and bosses that want to give you great feedback. But great feedback isn't just, well, I think the color is a little light. Let's make it darker. That's good, but you need to know that your big idea is not just a design idea. You need to know that your thinking is straight on. So that's what I have to say about getting out in front of criticism and kind of thinking about what people might attack you on before they even attack you allows you to be better prepared.
I guess I have a follow-up question for the group too. Do you find, and this is an area I struggle with, sometimes, delivering feedback in a kind but constructive way, right? It's a growth area for me. Do you think in general, with people coming out of schools or entry-level positions that you're seeing, are they not getting that feedback in college a lot of times, and then when they get to the workforce, it's like jarring? Or, I guess I don't even know if it's a question, but what advice if they're not getting that feedback, if it's all very positive? We all need constructive feedback to grow. What advice do you have for students that maybe could seek that out other places if they're not getting it in the classroom or maybe in their entry-level job? Especially in the classroom, I suppose.
Yeah, I don't think they are, at least from my perspective. I don't think they are getting that sort of feedback, unfortunately. And maybe it's not easy to set that up in a classroom setting in a college or university. I kind of get that.
I don't think I had that in college. You know what I mean? Yeah, I remember being like, whoa, I hope, in the marketing, I think the next question is about biggest piece of advice, right? So one of my pieces is about, going out and getting internships and things like that. If they're fortunate enough, and believe me, it's a big deal when it comes to hiring. If I look and see you have
internships on your resume, that is a big deal. Hopefully someone in your internships was kind enough to introduce you to the concept of constructive criticism in some way, right? And I try to make sure when we have interns that we do the same thing, right? Because you absolutely have got to be able to take criticism. You can't wilt, you can't pout, and you can't, take your ball and go home for weeks at a time. It's part of the game, especially on the creative side. I'm on the client side more than the creative or the agency side, but in the agency world, and I haven't, managed an agency or anything like that, but I've been working with them and I've seen what happens when they have creative directors or even people that can't take it. And the meetings are extrememely awkward.
I really loved Dave's feedback though, just because I think so often it's, you get so in the weeds, and to keep the main goals and everything at the front end. I mean, I think it's so easy for anyone to do in any industry. So that was really good advice. Okay. I'm going to switch over to John, and then basically we'll just do around the room kind of like final thoughts, biggest pieces of advice, that sort of thing. And what Mark was saying segues really well into the question for John is, any tips on how to get on the job experience when you're first starting out?
Yeah, internships before you start, internships and job shadowing is huge. If you have the opportunity to come into an organization and watch how things actually happen, like from a 25,000 foot view, and then start working on things, that's huge. Then also asking for more things. If you first start out, you start asking, can I help? Can you teach me this from your team, from other team members? The more that you're receptive to trying to put additional effort into your own, like when you ask those questions, you're asking for education, further education. Like that piece is so crucial. Like I'll take a C- person that has the right attitude and wants to learn over an MBA with a 4.0, because I want them to know how to work and be relevant.
You get two thumbs up on that one, buddy.
Yeah, I love it.
You need people that can be coached.
Yep.
Totally.
100%. Great point.
Awesome. All right. So just kind of, I guess, how we're doing on time. Let's just take a quick little look here. I think we're doing, oh man, we're just at 46. It's hard if we go a little over. Final thoughts, I kind of, as if there's one piece of advice, if this is a high school student or a Bay student, or we're going to be, hopefully sharing this with whoever is interested. What would be your big, if they could walk away with one big thing, what would you want them to know? Or if there's any kind of, just kind of a wrap up from each of you.
I'll go first. John just said it. Okay, that was a great point. Like, be willing to start at the bottom, and when you're working your way up, consume everything that organization will feed you, and volunteer for more. Like, learn parts of the job that aren't even your job, like to broaden your perspective. Dave alluded to that a little bit before too. Like, it's just so important to understand what you're doing in the grand, context of things. And I think I also put down, be willing to move. Okay, so if you've decided that marketing is a career for you, especially early on, chances are you're probably going to have to move around a little bit geographically to get jobs and to move up. Unless you're blessed to come into an org that's just beginning and you're the first marketing person and then you grow with it, those things are few and far between. But don't, just understand, I might have to be mobile for a while. And then once you start getting some street cred and experience, as they say, then you can be picky about where you go and what you want to do.
Build your network early. Sorry, Dave, but build your network early. Build your network early. Like, and network starts with like the people you're in classes with in high school, in college, people you meet at, if we ever get back to conferences or virtual conferences, discussion boards, like building that network and understanding where to go. You never know where anyone might land. And I'm not talking about changing jobs. I'm talking about gathering information. Like, you might end up, there might be a CMO in your marketing class today that's a CMO in 7 years or 10 years. And then that relevant knowledge, you can pick on that and be reciprocal with your knowledge. So keep that networking up.
Awesome.
The only thing I would add to all this is that, I think that one of the things that I see with young people today that even that come with recommendations from their their professors said, "Oh, this is a great student. They're going to be able to do really well for you." And we've had that here. There's still something that not many bring to the table, and that's a willingness to really work. I remember when I was young in this game, and I just reveled in nights in downtown Chicago. When it was 10 o'clock at night, I was still at work, and I would look out at all the high rises, and I saw lights on in different offices. And I realized that I wasn't the only one that was still working. All right. And I started to, I said, boy, I'm working a lot. And I finally said, oh, I'm getting paid this much. But I started to keep track of the hours that I was working every week. And I think that I was making $1.28 an hour. All right. But I learned so much because I was working so much, and I was learning everything that I could not have benefited from that as much. With having a clean, easy job handed to me, I loved being able to do that. My advice for everybody is to don't be afraid to work, and work a little bit for free, because for free is for you. That's what it's really all about. You're doing the work for you, not for somebody else. You're doing this for you and your career. So don't be afraid to put in the time. And if you really want to get into marketing, be ready to put in the time.
Oh man, you guys, this was so good. Thank you so much. I'm going to hit stop to the record button, but thank you again for your time. And this is going to be really great for a lot of people in our area.